What is up, YouTube? This is Nanashi with yet another deck profile video. This time I will be going back and showing off my modified Darkness deck. I've had this deck for a very long time, and I still try my hardest to keep it as up-to-date and as powerful as I possibly can while sticking to only dark attribute cards. And so far, I like to think I've done a pretty good job. And with the release of some of the new support for the Phantom Knights, I decided to put at least one of the new cards in here, and a couple of random texts that are actually showing a lot of promise. So let's see where this goes. Starting off at the lower levels, we have a pair of Battle Faders. Opponent makes a direct attack, special summon this from hand, and then end the battle phase. It's extremely useful considering this deck still has a few speed mechanic issues. It gives me a chance to save myself. Similarly with Shaddoll Falco. We all know what the Shaddolls do, but this one specifically is a 2-star tuner, and if it's flipped, you target a Shaddoll in your grave and special summon it face down except itself. And if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, then you can special summon it face down in defense, but you can only use each effect of this card once per turn. This card has actually helped me stay alive more times than I want to admit. Phantom Knights of Ancient Cloak, however, is part of the newer cards that I've started adding to this deck. I decided to do a Shaddoll, Phantom Knight, remove from game dark deck. And this card has, well as the others, have actually helped me out immensely. Ancient Cloak says if it's in attack mode, you can target a dark monster on the field, change him to defense, and give that dark monster an extra 800 attack. And if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to add any Phantom Knights card from your deck to your hand except Ancient Cloak. Silent Boots, on the other hand, special summons itself if you control another Phantom Knights monster, from the hand, of course, and if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to move any Phantom Knights spell trap from your deck to your hand. Together, these two cards are actually very useful, although more often than not, I just toss them into the graveyard just so that I can get extra searches and such. Next, we move into the level 4 monsters, of which there are quite a few. The main star of the deck is honestly Armageddon Knight at 3. When he's summoned, you send any dark from your deck to the grave. It sets off the Shaddolls, it sets off the Phantom Knights, it sets off pretty much whatever else I want to put in the deck. And since a lot of it banishes itself, Doomsday Horror also comes into play quite a bit. Gains 300 attack and defense for each banished dark, and when it's destroyed and sent to the grave, I get to return all removed from play dark monsters to the grave. I want to point out that any banished Shaddolls actually get their effects when they hit the graveyard by Doomsday Horror's effect. So he is intrinsically useful, but I can't put him in at more than one because, well, he's not really searchable, nor is he usually powerful unless I have a game that lasts more than 2 rounds, and these days I generally don't. Kage to Kage is always helpful. You know how it works. You normal summon a level 4, you special summon it from hand, can't be used for synchro. It's obviously good for my Xyz plays, and I have about 2 different ways to search him out. Summoner Monk. Drop a spell from your hand to special summon a level 4 from deck. I mainly use him to get out Armageddon Knights, and Armageddon Knight's effect will drop something to the grave. It's a fun combo. And Phantom Knights of Cloven Helm is how I usually recover some of those cards back after they've been used. If a Phantom Knights card is sent to the grave, you get to give him 500 attack points permanently, and if he's in the grave, you can banish him and add a Phantom Knights card from your grave back to your hand. Perfect reuse, but I mainly use it for the spell traps that I run in a deck. There's only a few of them, but the way the level 3s accelerate them to my hand, he became infinitely more useful when I started speeding it up. Witch of the Black Rose is still a questionable tech, in all honesty. It's a great card, don't get me wrong, it's a 4-star tuner, you can't ask for more than that. And it can't be special summoned, and if it's the only card on the field when you normal summon it, then you get to draw a card, and if it's a monster, you get the keeper. If it's a spell trap, they both go to the grave. Honestly, more often than not, I get a monster, so she very rarely fails on her effect. And then we get to the high-level monsters, of which there's only a couple. A pair of Shaddoll Beasts. When it's flipped, you draw 2 and discard 1. If it's sent to the grave by a card effect, you just draw 1. It's mostly my main drop target for Armageddon Knight if I don't feel like using the Phantom Knights cards to set up a defense. In the meantime, though, Dark Creator is the perfect card in this deck because it lets me bring back any dark monster in my graveyard. And more often than not, I usually end up with a dead field or a cleared field, so getting him out is never a problem. You can banish a dark out of the grave, special summon a dark out of the grave, and you can only summon him if you have no monsters and 5 or more darks in the grave. Next, we move into the spell cards, of which there are actually quite a few. Starting off with the triple Allure of Darkness, nothing made me happier than when this card finally came back to 3. Draw 2 cards, banish a dark out of hand. If you can't, or you don't, your entire hand goes to the grave. Honestly, I will use this card regardless if there's a dark monster in my hand or not, because I still use its effects of sending the cards to the graveyard. It's a great setup card, in my personal opinion. Double Creeping Darkness, on the other hand, is the only reason this deck has as much consistency as it does, as far as getting the level 4s to my hands efficiently. I banish 2 darks out of the grave and add a level 4 dark from my deck to my hand. It's fantastic. We also have a tear of MSTs. I've been thinking about just replacing this card with Twin Twisters, but I just don't have the Twin Twisters yet. At least none that I can spare. 1 reinforcement of the army. There's definitely enough warriors to justify this card. Double Shaddoll Fusion. Performing a fusion straight from deck when your opponent controls an extra deck monster is fantastic, because then you can drop a Shaddoll and a Phantom Knight monster. I'm honestly thinking about upping this card to 3 just because of how useful it is, but for right now, 2 is fine. And then the Phantom Knight's Rank Up Magic Launch. This is the newest card that I've been teching around with, and honestly, I love it in this deck because I can just reuse it. During the main phase, I can target a Dark Xyz monster I control with no materials, which is not hard, and special summon from my extra deck a Dark Xyz monster that's a rank higher, and give this card to it as an Xyz material. And if it's in the graveyard, I can banish it to attach a Phantom Knights monster from my hand to a Dark Xyz monster as an Xyz material. This makes it so that every single Phantom Knights monster can be used in the deck virtually flawlessly. And I usually end up getting it in the graveyard too quickly because I drop it for Summoner Monk and then I add it back later with Cloven Helm. Then we move into the trap cards, of which there's only a few. Single Bottomless, Double Dark Light. This card, I love it in this deck. I love it. You tribute a dark monster with 15 or more attack and destroy all monsters that were special summoned this turn. Wipes fresh boards clean. Love it. And then the triple Phantom Knight's Fogblade. I have been so happy since I put this card in here over Fiendish Chain and the other trap card, the Poor Man's Breakthrough Skill, Memory Loss, because its functionality is so much better. I can use it on either side. You target an effect monster, its effects are negated, it can't attack, and you can't attack it. What's interesting is that if I'm in a pinch, I can use this card on my own monster and make it so that they basically can't do anything during the battle phase. And if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to target a Phantom Knights monster in the grave and special summon it. So either way, its functionality is without question. Next up, we'll go ahead and move into the side deck, starting with the other 2 copies of Ancient Cloak. I'm specifically only running 1 in the main deck because 2 and 3 of this thing was very clunky. It doesn't really have a way to summon itself out of the hand, and sure, I can just pitch it for another card's effect, but it's still too clunky in my opinion. Right now, it's fine at 1. Triple Dark Refer, in the event that something ends up happening and I need to swap out Armageddon Knight for it to get rid of my dead hands. You can special summon it by dropping a level 5 or higher dark monster, and there's only 4, but, you know, it still works. And once per turn, you can drop a dark from your hand to send a dark from the deck to the graveyard. So it could be a double setup. We also have Prometheus, the boss monster of this deck, or at least he used to be. And if I normal summon him, I can remove play any number of dark monsters in my grave, and he gains 400 attack for each removed card until the end phase of the turn. I have won games in the past solely because of this monster. He is insane. Shaddoll Dragon. Honestly, I decided against keeping him in the main. I kept getting him in my hand before I had a chance to drop him to the graveyard from the deck with another effect. So, you drop him into the graveyard by a card effect, he acts as MST. And if he's flipped, you can target a card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. So, not really as useful as I'd like him to be. The other Witch. 2, beginning of the end. There are 7 or more darks in the grave, which is easy. You banish 5, and draw 3. Now that this deck actually banishes its own cards so efficiently, this card's not as useful as it used to be, but I'm keeping it for right now because changes will be made come February that will make this card valid again. The other rank up launch, double memory loss, torrential, and vanities. And finally we finish up with what I consider to be the most versatile extra deck in any of the decks that I actually own. Triple El Shaddoll Winda. I get the spell card back in my hand so often, this card constantly becomes alive. Requires a Shaddolls monster and a dark monster. As long as it's face up, can't be destroyed by card effects. By an opponent's card effect, I'd like to point that out. As long as it's face up on the field, neither player can special summon more than once per turn, and if it goes to the graveyard, I can add a Shaddoll spell trap and migrate back to the hand. So it's constant recycle. LA Justice Catastor, old synchro monster. At the start of the damage step, it battles anything that's not a dark monster, it destroys it automatically. I love it. It's perfect for those non-dark opposing monsters, of which there's plenty. Celestial Wolf Lord Blue Sirius is questionably good. I mean, if it's destroyed and sent to the grave, you can target a face-up monster the opponent controls and make it lose 2,400 attack, so it eliminates a lot of the boss monsters. Dark Strike Fighter, even though it's nerfed, is a good 7-star synchro. During your main phase 1, you tribute a monster and inflict damage to your opponent equal to its level times 200. So it could be my version of Gaga Cowboy. Of course, no dark deck would be complete without a copy of Beals of the Diabolic Dragons. Indestructible by battle and card effects, when you take damage from an attack involving him or from a card effect, you gain attack equal to the damage that you took. It's a great card. And then the Dark End Dragon, a personal choice for this deck because its effect gets rid of a lot of indestructible targets. You can reduce his attack and defense by 500 and send a monster opponent controls to the grave. Just send it. Gone. Phantom Knight's a break sword. I was so lucky I picked this up when it was just freshly out of the booster packs. Requires 2 level 3s, and you can detach a material from it and basically get a Scrap Dragon effect. And if he gets destroyed, you can target 2 Phantom Knights in the grave at the same level, summon them back, and increase their level by 1. But you can't summon monsters for the rest of the turn except darks, which there's only darks in here. Chiron Gorgon redirects targeting effects multiple times, but it can only redirect targeting effects of an effect that targets 1 card. So MST is usually the thing I end up redirecting the most, but still, it's useful. Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon. No dark deck would be complete without one of these either. Double detach to target an opponent's face-up monster, halve its attack, and give it to Dark Rebellion. Evil Swarm Nightmare. This is a card that helps me eliminate a lot of problem special summon stuff. If the opponent special summons a monster or monsters, you can detach a material to turn them all face down. It's multi-time per turn. And 1950 defense isn't terrible. King of the Feral Imps. This is mainly how I summon Kage to Kage, and it works perfectly well. Detach material, search a reptile. Only 2 targets in the entire deck, but that's fine. Number 66 Master Key Beetle. I'm questioning keeping this card in the deck right now, but I don't really have many other options, so I'm going to use it. You detach a material to target a card you control. As long as the Key Beetle is on the field, that card cannot be destroyed by card effects. But if Key Beetle will be destroyed, you contribute that card instead. And the rank 5 that I have in this deck right now for the rank up spell is Crimson Eye Vampire Ram. I know I can't really summon it normally, and that honestly irritates me a little bit, but you know what? It's not the end of the world. And its effect's pretty good too. You detach material, target any opponent's monster in the grave, and special summon it to your side. So if it's been a while and you've been able to kill some of their powerful stuff, you can steal it. You can only attack with that monster during that turn though. And if he gets destroyed and sent to the graveyard, then during the next standby phase, you summon him back in defense mode. And that is the deck. Honestly, like I've said before, I love this deck. I've had this deck longer than pretty much any other theme deck that I've ever had, because the Dark attribute has just been constantly supported over the years, in general and even in specific. But the thing is, the deck is starting to show signs that it's slowing. My ultimate plan, though, is that on February, when the new set is released, I'm planning on putting in a couple copies of that lawn mowing next door, or grass is always tastier, or whatever the hell its name is. I'm planning on putting a couple copies of that card in this deck, increasing the deck count to, I don't know, probably 50, and putting in some of the Phantom Knight monsters that I put to the side, as well as some of the beginning of the end copies. And then this deck might actually see more versatility, more speed, and more play. But until then, if anybody else has any ideas as to how I can improve this deck, please let me know. But in the meantime, this has been Nanashi, signing out.